Hi, and welcome to the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone, you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Alice Chin, founder and CEO of Your Other Half, a small business operations firm that helps entrepreneurs create sustainable, scalable business solutions. Alice leverages her professional expertise and creative business talents to help innovators bring their ideas into the world. She recognized her talent for managing people and projects while serving in leadership roles in the Columbia University undergraduate art community. This talent became Alice's passion as she applied her problem-solving brain to business operations, project management, and event production as an independent consultant at multiple companies, while developing her people management skills in human resources roles at Newsweek and Institute of Play. Thanks for being with us today, Alice, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Maggie, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to hear from you. So I would love if you could just jump into the group chat or chat to Maggie, and I'll look at that as we go along. I'd love to hear how many of you are currently actively job seeking, if you're thinking about looking for maybe a promotion to a new role, or if you're going to use your career story to get clients, if you are a business owner. I'm just trying to get a sense of the mix in the room. So if you could answer that question in the group chat, would really love to hear from you. And if you are in a career looking for either a new job or you're looking to advance your career to get the next job up the rung to get a promotion, would love to kind of hear what stage of your careers you are in. So if you're in the first 5 years, if you're in the first 10 years, or you're past the 10-year mark, would be great to hear. So any response you guys could put in the group chat would be fantastic. So I'll just tell you guys a little bit about me. Maggie already gave you a fantastic introduction, so not very much more is needed. But my company is called Your Other Half. We're a small business operations firm, which means we work with business owners primarily to help them make their businesses more efficient and effective by educating and empowering them to understand what their responsibilities are under the law and what business best practices are. We also do some work with individuals who are job seeking, and that's really more leaning on my HR experience. I've been an HR manager, as Maggie mentioned, at Newsweek Magazine, Institute of Play, and other organizations, and I act on that behalf for many of my clients. So I'm often running a lot of recruiting. Currently, I'm working on, I think, 16 open positions. And so that's really where the content from today's call is going to be. I'm on the other side of the table from job seekers all the time. So our goal for today is to give you the tools to design your career story immediately, to come up with one that makes you feel confident, that is compelling to recruiters, that will help you get in the door and help you secure the job. So a little bit about me. So my passion is working with talented, creative, and committed business owners to make their dreams a reality. So many of them have great ideas, but no operational expertise, and that's the gap we're really here to fill. I'm the founder and CEO of my company, which I run with my husband, who's my business partner. That's a picture of me, my husband Phil, and my dog Muggle on our wedding day. And we also have 3 employees who work for us to make this a real for our clients. I just put a few other things I love in here: spending time with my husband and dog. I read all the time. I love to cook, and I love winning at word games, Scrabble and Bananagrams being my favorite. I like to share stuff like that just so it doesn't feel like I'm some robotic voice behind a screen, but so you guys actually get to know me a little bit. All right, so jumping in. So we're going to talk about what a career story is first, but first I would love to see, I'm just looking at some of the responses you guys have here. Great, so we have someone in business over 20 years looking to grow their practice. That's fantastic. Somebody looking for a job past the 10-year mark and looking for a promotion by higher positions in a new job elsewhere. Fantastic. Career advancement by advancing my responsibilities. Awesome, so that's really looking for a promotion. And then looking for a new job. So this is fantastic. Great to hear. Thank you, ladies, so much for your responses. So it sounds like we'll focus more a little bit more on the job seeking side, but so much of this content really applies to both. So I think everybody will get something really powerful out of it. So what is a career story? So for us, a career is basically, obviously your professional journey, but is also, it's really a combination of the personal and professional experience, skills, and abilities that you use in your professional life. So it's about taking everything that you are that can apply to your professional life, and really thinking about it in a holistic way. And for us, a story is just a narrative that you design. And I think that's the critical element today here, what you design to share with others. And so today we're going to be talking about how you essentially design a narrative that communicates everything you are personally and professionally that applies to your professional life to make people be excited and thrilled and just absolutely banging down your door to work with you, and to really give you the control and confidence to do that. Um, Fantastic. Okay, so why should you spend your time creating a career story? Why is it important? So I think that taking the time to really design this, and this is really an exercise in design, practice, and self-reflection, is to give you kind of three key differentiators. The first is confidence, right? If you have the opportunity to really take the time to think about your narrative, to think about what you say, to think about what you want to share, equally as important to think about what you don't want to share, what you do not want to say in an interview or when you're trying to get a client, that will give you confidence. You'll walk into the room knowing that you've fully prepared. You'll be aware of everything that you've done everything that you can possibly do. And I think that absolutely brings confidence for every one of my clients who I've worked with on a job search. Clarity, right? So if you practice your career story, if you go through the steps I'm going to teach you guys today, you'll have absolute clarity about what are the things that make you different, what are the things that make you special, what are the things that make you kind of the unique person for the role that you're applying for, and you'll be able to communicate that with clarity. Doing so will really give the person on the other side of the table, you'll do their job for them. They don't have to figure out if you're a fit, right? You're going to do that work for them. And then the third reason is really opportunity. So designing a career story gives you the opportunity to present yourself exactly as you want to be seen. It gives you the opportunity to really show exactly how you're a fit for the role or for the client. But more than that, I've found that when I have the confidence and clarity to communicate about myself exactly the way that I want to, it opens new opportunities. This career story is something that you can use in pieces to kind of talk to somebody, about yourself in an elevator, um, or at a dinner party or anywhere. But I'm always surprised that when I share these elements of this career story that I've designed, how it opens new opportunities. People start to hear in the story things that they need for themselves or they need for their community, and then they're able to bring me in on that. So that's really why we're here for you guys today. So, what goes into someone's career story? So, when I say career story, I'm really talking about the whole narrative of how you present yourself to either, somebody, an HR recruiter, potentially a hiring manager, potentially, or a new client, right? If you're coming from a client perspective. And so, from that way, everything that they can find about you and everything that you say about yourself is included in a career story. So, in a traditional job seeking environment, that's your resume, that's your cover letter, that's writing samples, any tests they might have you take. So, like a typing test, or a lot for more senior positions, they often have you do kind of a test run, maybe write a sample piece, maybe do a sample edit, maybe do a sample piece of code, depending on your field, or portfolio submission, which we generally see more in creative careers or educational careers where they're asking you to submit a curricula, or a portfolio of work. Right, so that's kind of the formal pieces. But then obviously we live in modern times these days. So you're also going to be judged absolutely, absolutely on anything somebody can find about you online. So that's definitely your LinkedIn profile. That was absolutely your Google search results. Everybody here should know what's in their first 5 pages of Google results for their name. Go do it right now if you haven't before. And then social media profiles. So one thing I want to really encourage you to be careful about is making sure that if you are job searching, to potentially either change your name or lock down your profiles on social media if you use them personally and there's stuff in there that you might not want an employer to see. So remember all of that. So that all is part of your career story, right? Your career story is everything that a person you communicate to a person directly, but it's also everything that they can find out about you indirectly. And so all of this should be part of your management. right? We can't necessarily always change what comes up in a Google search about us, but what we can do is know that that information is out there and then address it in our career story. It's really, the career story is really all of the things that you put together to communicate about yourself. All right, moving right along. I want to get through the content pretty quickly so that you guys can ask some questions. If I'm going too fast, though, at any point, please just hit me up in the chat and I will let you guys know. Okay, so how do you build a career story? So these are the steps that I was talking about before. So I want you to start, and I think this is particularly hard for women, right? And it was one of the bullets that I put um, in the announcement for this class. How do you feel comfortable tooting your own horn? How do you talk about your strengths and achievement with ease? Well, it starts by you knowing what those are and writing out really, really super clear examples. I remember the first time that I did this for myself, it was so uncomfortable, right? It was so uncomfortable to write down all my professional achievements. But I really took the time to do it, and I really encourage you to do it on paper. I think there's something really powerful about the act of writing it down. So write down all your professional achievements. What are programs that you've run? What are projects that you've succeeded in? What are opportunities that you've had for leadership and management? What are kind of promotions that you've got? What are awards that you've been given? What are, you can maybe dig out some old documents you have, right? Like see if you've gotten certificates or special accommodations, see what's on your performance reviews in the past if you've had some really positive performance reviews. Bring all of that to the table and write down your professional achievements. But I want to be really clear. Don't just write down what the achievement is. Write the clear example, right? Write what you did, right? Focus on the action words. Focus on how your action made this thing happen. And that's going to be really important later as you're kind of pulling this all together. Um, Second, we want to write down all of your professional abilities and any personal ones you can do at work, right? So again, we really want to go for clear examples here. But so you want to think about not only things that you have done and achieved, but also things that you are capable of doing, because that's often what career advancement is about, right? Or even sometimes new client work is also about, right? Wanting to have access to an opportunity that allows you to try out new skills and to develop new skills. And this is a really important place where you can leverage a lot of your personal experiences, particularly volunteer experiences, mentorship experiences, even things like, working in the PTA or in your church or at other places within your community, right? We want to think about ways that you've had skills, opportunities, and values that you can share with somebody to show that you've demonstrated the skill or ability. It's not just something you want to try, but something you've actually tried before, even if it's in a different context. So here you want to write down really clear examples too. Then you want to review your resume. And in addition to your resume, everything that we looked at on the prior slide, right? So your resume, your LinkedIn, everything that people can find out about you on Google, everything that, if you choose to have your Facebook or your Twitter or anything public, look at those too, right? And get a sense of what kind of gaps you might have. That's particular to your resume, but also what kind of questions people might have based on what they see about you, right? And that's really what gaps in your resume is about, right? It's going to immediately trigger a question. And so that's the kind of thing that you want to be looking at when you're looking at a self-review, right? You want to um, really write down anything that you think would generate a question. Write down the question and then write down your answer, right? And also when you're looking at your resume and going back through all these different things, you might want to write down things to highlight, right? You might have a fantastic review on LinkedIn that somebody wrote about you, and you might want to point the person that you're meeting with to that, right? Or you might have something in your Google, maybe you were featured in an article that's really important, right? You want to identify essentially here, it's a strengths and weakness analysis. And you want to write down, obviously, the strengths, key examples, things you want to point people to. And then you also want to write down the gaps or questions people might have. If it's a question, you want to write the answer. So like, for instance, there are some simple ways to do this, right? You might look at your resume and have a few gaps, a few months in between jobs when you were looking for new work. One simple way to resolve that question before you even get in the room is to just take out the months in your resume and just show years. It'll immediately erase the gap, right? So that's really easy. But if you have a bigger gap on your resume, right, you might have like a 7-year gap where you left the workforce maybe to care for your kids, right? So you want to come up with a way to talk about why that was important, how that developed you as a person, how it relates to you being, maybe you develop kind of new skills and aptitudes, right? I mean, some of it you can make a joke out of it, but some of it's true, right? Parenting is all about multitasking. It's all about high stress. It's all about communication and patience, right? And these are things that can be valuable in the workplace too. So think about ways that you can talk about maybe opportunities there, particularly if you weren't only involved with your family, but also involved with your community. And then you can also really have a sense of humor about it. We recently I recently saw a resume where somebody had been out of the workforce for a while, and they put, as their current title, home economist and early childhood development specialist, right? So let people know that you know about this, about yourself, and see it. So really, again, identify your gaps and questions and answer them, and then identify the things you want to highlight. That'll be important for the pivot later, which we're going to talk about shortly. Then, once you've gathered all this data, right, all of that is just data gathering. Then what you want to do is sit down and write your career story. Generally, I recommend you start kind of at the beginning. If you've had a long career, you want your beginning to be kind of short, highlights only, and then get in more detail as you go along. If you're earlier in your career or earlier in your business, you want to kind of start the detail earlier in your career story. But you want to always do a few things. Use super clear examples. So, you want to identify for people an example of each thing that you've done, or a highlight at each place that you've worked, or a success story for a few clients that you've had, right? Really spell it out for them. Don't assume that they're going to figure it out. And the second thing is really kind of make sure that there's a narrative throughout, kind of behind the story, right? So not just about this is what I've done, right? We don't want it to be a recitation or list of your accomplishments. We want it to feel like there's a human story. Why did you do these things? What was important to you? What skills or aptitudes did you develop? What made it special to you? And what makes you special because of those experiences that you've gone through? So really kind of think about, after you've written down kind of chronologically where you've gone, what is that through line for you and your particular story? I'm going to move along a little bit quickly here because I'm running out of time. And then once you've done that, review for clarity and confidence. And when in doubt, keep it simple. That's always my favorite. So when I do that review and revision, I'm always looking for what are the things that I can take out so that only the best of the best, the cream of the crop, is left in my story. And then how do you feel confident talking about your story, right? So we're going to talk about confidence now and pivot, right? So the first thing is to practice. Once you've written your story, you want to practice. You want to say it out loud. Say it out loud to yourself. Say it out loud in the mirror. Look at how you say when you talk about it. Talk to a friend. Really get somebody else to listen to you. Grab your husband or your wife, grab your kids, grab anybody and practice. Having other people listen will also help you find where the gaps are, or if something is unclear, right? There's a lot of times where something's super clear to us and it wouldn't be clear to somebody else. I think another thing about this is that practice is one way to make yourself feel confident, but another is to remember what you're doing this for, right? Sharing your strengths, sharing your gifts, tooting your own horn is an opportunity, is first, it's honest, right? It's honest to share what you actually can do. But also, it's the only way that you're ever going to be able to share those gifts with somebody else, with the world, with your employer, with a client. It's the only way you're going to be able to do the great work that you want to do. And so don't feel uncomfortable being honest about what you actually can do. Be proud of what you can do. But again, that confidence really comes from, I think, the practice. And then you want to practice the pivot. So when I say practice the pivot, you've already written a list of questions that you think somebody might have about your experience in work and have answers. So you can literally have somebody ask you that question and then practice pivoting back to your story, right? So you know what that question is, you know how to answer it. But you also might want to think about some kind of general interview questions that people ask, right? So, you know, general interview questions people are always going to ask. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about this gap in your resume. Tell me what you loved about your last job and what you hated about it. Tell me what your professional strengths and weaknesses are, right? So you might want to take some of those questions and practice answering it with a piece of your career story. So again, you're only talking about what you want to talk about in this meeting, in this interview. so that you are focused on what you want to say rather than necessarily giving them exactly what they need. So I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I get asked a lot, or I used to when I was interviewing, not so much anymore now that I have my own business, but is that weakness question. What is one of your weaknesses, right? And I've always been in the project management, human resources, operations space in my career. And so I would use it as an opportunity to kind of talk about a strength without really talking about a strength. So someone would say to me, Alice, what are your weaknesses? And I would say, well, one of my biggest weaknesses is that I'm really I'm really maybe a little bit too anal about organization. So usually that would make them giggle a little bit. And then I would say, I'm really super committed to having a totally organized life. It's very important to me to have an organized space. It's very important to me that my work is done in an organized way. And sometimes that can mean that I'm a little bit too rigid. But what it also means is that I'm 100% committed. I do the fantastic work. I am always organized. I'm on top of what I know. And that I know that this is something that I can work on, right? And I'm looking for an opportunity to be in an environment where my organization is valued, but also that people kind of can be a little bit flexible and poke fun at me about it. Right. And so what did that do to the person who was listening? I actually didn't tell them about a weakness. I told them about a strength. I told them about something that they might want to hear about that they would feel was useful to them. And then I was able to poke fun at myself, right? To really kind of share a little bit, show that I had a sense of humor. So think about those things. Think about ways to take those questions and pivot them into something you want to talk about. Then I would also say plan what parts of your personal story you want to share and which parts are off limits. So be strategic about this, right? If you've been out of the workforce because you're a parent, or if you've been out of the workforce because of a downsizing or something like that, you have to think about how you want to communicate that. But what you want to make sure you don't do is overshare and not be able to bring something back, right? So be aware of the fact that employers expect people to have families, but if you talk about, your family, for an extended period of time in the interview, people are going to be concerned about you being committed to the job, right? So you want to, same thing. If you talk about a lot of your volunteer commitments within your community and you're using them to talk about your strengths and abilities, that's fantastic. But if an employer feels like you're overcommitted, you're doing so many volunteer things, they might be concerned about your time and your commitment to your job. So you want to really just think about your personal story. Maybe write down the 5 things that you want to share, but maybe write down some things you don't want to share too. Be prepared for that. And then again, when we talk about practice, attend a mock interview, go to workplace development center, former school, find a friend. Practice, practice, practice makes perfect. All right, and I'm going too long. All right, so these are some resources for job seekers, particularly they're linked here, but Maggie will share them with you. And these are ways that you can practice your career story and some resources for how you might make your overall career story that includes all the different pieces more professional. And Maggie will share the links to these in the follow-up to the webinar. All right, so that's actually the end of the content, and I'm glad that I got through it pretty quickly. I tend to talk too much, but I would love, love, love to hear from you guys what questions you have right now. So you can drop those in the group chat. Maggie may come back on and ask some of those questions to me, but I do want to let you know, all of you, if you found this content helpful, if you have questions that I don't get to answer in this question and answer period, or if there's anything that you would like to know further, I'd love for you to keep in touch. So you can check out our website, which is right here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And, maybe one of you is a fit for one of the 15 jobs I have open, or you can feel free to email me directly, and that's my email right there. So does anybody have any questions about their career story? I know I've thrown a ton of content at you. Please remember, if you've been frantically taking notes because I talk so fast, that you will get a recording of this webinar. So you will also have access to it there with the slides. All right, we have a question. So Ruthie is asking, how far back should you go in your resume or career story? So Ruthie, I really think that depends kind of on how long your career is. I do generally think you should kind of start close to the beginning. I think showing an arc of how you arrived at where you are is usually valuable to most recruiters. But like I said, I would keep probably the beginning of your story brief if you've been working for more than 10 years. So I would say that you want to focus most of your attention on probably the most recent 5 to 10 years of your experience. So I would say, if let's say your career story is 10 minutes, I would want you to spend somewhere between 7 and 8 minutes talking about the last 5 to 10 years of your career, depending on how many different things you've been doing. So you just want to cover, the first part of your career in a few quick steps, right? So, kind of like Maggie just said, if we were talking about my career, I would really want to be focusing on my business. So, I would say something like, I went to Barnard College, which I loved. After that, I had a great opportunity to work at a large law firm and then at Newsweek Magazine in Human Resources, which I absolutely adored. And then I went on to start my own practice. And then I would focus on talking about my own practice. Again, that's kind of the 30-second version. But I think that you want to really focus the majority of whatever time you have on your most recent experience. Great question. Thanks, Ruthie. Does anybody else have questions?
Alice, we had a question come in over email, and I'll read
Okay.
it to you here. The question is, some of my past jobs aren't really aligned with what I want to do now. How can I make those work for me?
Ah, great question. Whoever sent that in, thank you so much. And thank you, Maggie, for reading that to me. So I think it's important to understand one of two things, right? So if you omit things from your resume, and like if you have blocks of time missing, or if you're at an age where you probably should have had 20 years of work experience and you're giving them a resume with 5 years, that's going to be the first question. That's going to be immediately what recruiters are thinking. What is this person trying to hide? What are they not trying to tell me? So I generally recommend that you put those things on your resume somewhere in your story. Keep them general. You don't have to put a lot of bullet points under them. Don't spend a lot of time on them, but have them there. And then use the cover letter, use the interview, use the phone screen as an opportunity to talk about how your career has moved in a new direction and why. And talk about it as a strength because it often is, right? Learning how to be better at what you do, learning how to pivot from something that you tried and maybe weren't great at or maybe didn't love towards something that you think you're better at or you like more is a strength, right? Self-awareness, self-reflection is a strength. So I would encourage you to leave it on there, but I think it's absolutely one of the questions you should be prepared to talk about and to pivot, right? To keep pivoting back to your strength, what you're doing now, why you're good at it, and why it's important to you. All right, we have another question.
Okay. Alice, do
Um,
you see this question that came in on the chat?
So I see one that says, so what if your career has been in the same
Yes.
for the past 10 to 15 years? Great. Okay. What do you include in your resume and story? So I think what you want to do here is you can repeat. So if you've basically done the same job for a period of time, what you still want to do is kind of show people, right? Most career people want somebody who's committed. They want somebody who's a little bit ambitious, right? Who wants to move forward, who has an interest in growth. And I think that somebody who's been excellent at what they do. So I think what you want to do is just come up with examples of how you've, even if the tasks and responsibilities have been the same, come up with examples, come up with stories, come up with things that feel engaging to talk about how what you do is something that you excel at, right? And that's really going to come down to the examples. One thing that I've had some of my clients do who've worked with me is to go to people who they've worked with in the past or people that they're working with currently if they trust them and ask them, what are my strengths, right? Can you remember something that I've done that's been so spectacular? And often hearing that from other people can give you an avenue or an access point that you might not see yourself to talk about something really excellent. But I would really focus on what are the things that you've done spectacularly? What are the ways that you've served the people you work with spectacularly? What makes you a great team member? And pull out examples that are related to that. Being in the same job for a long time is a strength, right? It's not a weakness. So I think you would just really want to focus in that instance on very specific examples. Great. Do we have any more questions?
Okay. We had another question come in over email, which is social media something that I can incorporate into my career story if I'm only using it in my personal life?
So I think that it could be. I think you want to really be careful and ask yourself, what is the benefit of doing that, right? So I think the benefit sometimes of that is to say, I have some familiarity with this tool, which people appreciate. But you want to be really careful, right? If somebody's saying that they are, if a requirement on a job, for instance, is, familiarity with Facebook, and you say, yeah, I'm familiar with Facebook. I'm on Facebook all the time. I use it for everything, right? What you are you want to be careful because what you would use business for in Facebook might be different than what you do it personally, right? So you might want to just ask a clarifying question in that interview. Say, hey, what do you mean when you say familiarity with Facebook? Obviously, I use it. I feel comfortable. I'm in groups, so I know how to be, like a group admin, something like that. But if you're talking about a business case where they need you to deal with Facebook ads or pixels or things like that. You don't want to misrepresent what you're able to do. So I would say that that's a great opportunity for a clarifying question. But yeah, I mean, if what they're asking about is, are you good at posting content to social media, right? Do you know how to use these tools? Absolutely share that you use them. And that would be really valuable. I think I would just ask for, go for clarity on that one.
Okay, thank you. And another question we have is about writing samples.
Mhm.
And it's not thinking that you have any writing samples that you can use from past jobs. So should you just create new writing samples for this new job?
So this is a great question. This is actually one I get asked all the time in my work. So I would say that you want to give a writing sample that is what they're looking for. So if they just say writing sample generally, I think you can create one. Absolutely. I think you can create one. I would generally recommend it's at least 3 paragraphs long. Obviously grammar and spelling and all that should be impeccable. But I think that write about something you're interested in, or people often in that case have written a letter to me about why they're interested in the job and used it as another pitch opportunity, which I usually actually really like, and I think most people do. Just the other thing to do here, though, is maybe it's also an opportunity for a clarifying question. If it's your initial submission, don't ask a clarifying question because they don't know you. But if it's later on in the process, you can say, hey, what kind of writing sample are you looking for? And you want to try to match what they're looking for, right? So for instance, if you're applying for a general executive assistant job, sending them another piece of, sending them a letter as to why you want the job more is probably a great fit. But if you're applying for something that's more technical writing or editing or something like that, and you submit something general, that's not as useful. So you want to kind of be aligned with what the job is as well.
Okay. And Alice, do you have time for one last question?
Absolutely.
Okay, is it okay to ask people to endorse your skills or ask for written recommendations on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked this. Yes, do this all the time. Yes, do it as often as you want, do it as many times as you want, to as many people as you want. I will say to you that I think the written reviews are way more powerful than endorsements, um, because it takes people more time often, and and it feels more genuine, I think, than the endorsements, right? It's easy to endorse somebody without even really knowing if they can do the skill or not. So I personally think the reviews are more important than the endorsements. But yes, ask away, ask often, ask from everyone. The other thing that you might want to consider is that often it's hard for people to find the time to write you a recommendation, even though they might want to. And if you feel that's the case, I have found in the past, and I've recommended this to some of my clients, sometimes you can write something about yourself in your work with them and send it to them and say, hey, if this feels right to you, maybe you could just post this. And it gives them an opportunity to do what they want for you, right? Which is help you out, even if they don't have the time to do so. So that's another opportunity and consideration. I know that feels probably a little ballsy, and it might be, but but I think it's valuable to have, especially the recommendations on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Well, those are all the questions we have for now, Alice. And we have your contact information here, which we'll share along with the resources you had on the previous slide, so we can send that out to everyone. So I want to thank you for an excellent presentation, Alice, for all the great tips you gave us. Thanks to everyone who joined us today, and thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.